Good evening. My name is Katie Navin. I'm the director of the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education, and so glad you could join us to talk about Colorado's newly revised environmental education plan. Hopefully you are well acquainted with Zoom, but if you need any technical assistance during the webinar, please go ahead and type that in the chat and we can help you out with that. If you're not familiar with CAEE, we are a professional network for anybody and everybody who teaches about the environment in some way across Colorado. Many of our members work in zoos, nature centers, museums, nonprofits, and of course, classrooms. We have kind of three focuses: driving excellence and providing strong professional development in environmental and outdoor learning, fostering collaboration and bringing folks together around shared goals in environmental and outdoor learning, and of course, mobilizing support and helping bring more support and funding to the field. So if you're interested in any of our work, I encourage you to check out our website and see if there are ways that you might want to get involved. As we begin, this is one of my favorite metaphors, and I think a guiding thread for the environmental education plan. Environmental and outdoor education experiences are like charging stations. They power up learning and help skills flow from one context to another. So whether you're learning in math or science or social studies, in school, out of school, all of those learning experiences help power other learning experiences and continue learning for students. And we hope that's something that we can really celebrate and leverage in environmental education. So I wanted to start just by describing what is an environmental education plan. You'll also hear them referred to as environmental literacy plans, especially when we're talking about them nationally. And they are state-specific frameworks that support school systems in expanding and improving environmental education programs. They really got started with legislation that was introduced federally in 2007 called No Child Left Inside. And that legislation would have, if it had passed, provided federal funding to states that have environmental education plans. Initially, and I think this still holds true today, that there were 5 things that were required to be a part of an environmental education or environmental literacy plan. That was the standard subjects or courses where environmental and outdoor learning would take place, how students demonstrate environmental literacy before graduation, how teachers are receiving or can access professional development in environmental and outdoor learning, how we measure the environmental literacy of students, and of course, how are we going to implement this plan? Specifically with the inclusion of the role of the Department of Education in the state. And so those 5 things really have driven states across the country. I think there are over 46 plans now, even though the legislation never passed, really thinking about how to move forward environmental and outdoor learning. So when we think about the plan, I always like to think about what the plan is and what the plan is not. The plan is just that. It is a plan. It's basically a collective vision of what we want our state environmental education and outdoor learning infrastructure to be. These are the structures we'd like to have in place to make sure that every student across the state can access environmental and outdoor learning. This is a collective vision. It's the vision of the Department of Education, the Department of Natural Resources, and partners like the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education. having the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Education engaged in the plan offers a lot of credibility. And I think for those who are looking to implement programs and do initiatives in schools, can utilize this plan as a way to say, look, this is something that is encouraged by the state. The plan also has a collective responsibility. There is no one entity or organization that is responsible for implementing the plan, which has strengths because there's a lot of stakeholders that can be engaged in it, and it has weaknesses because there's no one person in charge, which can make it sometimes harder to get things done. What the plan is not, it is not a curriculum. It's not something you would hand to a teacher to then implement in their classroom. It's also not a funding stream. There is no dedicated funding for the implementation of this plan. There are, however, quite a few strategies, maybe not quite a few, but there are strategies that are really getting at how are we going to secure funding to do this work. And then there's no guarantee, there's no penalty if we don't do the things in the plan. Again, it's this collective vision for what we'd like to achieve. So it's the first step in moving towards these things. Just to give you a little history, like I said, No Child Left Inside was introduced in 2007. Over 46 states started the process to develop these plans in hopes that they would receive federal funds to implement them. That legislation never passed. It was reintroduced a number of times, but never made it through both houses. But there are some things that had a ripple effect that occurred in the meantime. In 2009 was the first time that there was an intentional inclusion of environmental and outdoor learning in Colorado state standards. And we also passed Colorado Kids Outdoors Bill of Rights through the Lieutenant Governor's Office, which is a great tool to continue using today. In 2010, we were successful in passing the Colorado Kids Outdoors Grant Program Act. And as part of that act, it required the State Board of Education to adopt an environmental education plan. That plan was then drafted and adopted in 2012. And as a result of the plan, 4 leadership councils were established across the state. If you divide the state into quadrants, there's basically one in each quadrant. And they're really responsible for both creating a network in that region, as well as local implementation. And that looks different in every council in terms of how they are looking at implementation of the plan, but definitely folks that you can get in touch with for sure. In 2015, EE was included in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or the Every Student Succeeds Act, for the very first time. So that was a huge milestone. In several big funding buckets within the bill, environmental literacy is listed as eligible for funding. That was a direct result of the No Child Left Inside legislation, really moving some of those pieces into the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. In 2020, Colorado, of course, adopted new standards, and it was a great time to revise the plan. It had been a while, and we were ready to really think about what had changed and what was new. That process took a lot longer than we expected. There was a small pandemic in the middle of that process, but we were able to do several rounds of public feedback via survey and focus groups, and then launch the plan this fall. In 2022, great timing, in addition to launching the plan, No Child Left Inside was actually also reintroduced in April. And so we are continuing to work to see if we can move that legislation and bring federal funding to Colorado to help implement the plan. As I mentioned, it was a 2-year process, and we did several rounds of feedback, and then a writing team came together, including representatives from the Department of Education, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education. And this team is the team that took all of the feedback and wove it into the plan that you can download from the website today. So I want to do a little overview of what's in the plan and resources you can use, hopefully as early as tomorrow. The mission of the plan is really around collaboration. It's around how do we bring all different types of stakeholders together to ensure that all students have access to high quality environmental and outdoor learning. At the end of the day, what we want to achieve by creating that access is that all pre-K-12 students can understand, analyze, and take informed actions on environmental challenges and conservation. There are a few guiding principles that are woven throughout the plan, and those guiding principles, hopefully you'll see as threads and really served as kind of a guidepost for the writing team as we thought about what the strategies were and how we incorporated the feedback. One of those principles is we wanted this to be collaborative and have a unified approach. So how can we bring many stakeholders and community partners together to achieve this vision? We wanted to acknowledge and understand that this requires sustainability and scalability of systems. There are amazing environmental and outdoor learning initiatives, programs, school activities that are already happening. They're just not happening in every school, and every kid doesn't necessarily have access to them. So how do we think about sharing what's working, scaling models that work, and really figuring out how to sustain that across the state? And I think recognizing that that requires funding and resources. Of course, we want a commitment to quality and that these are high quality learning experiences. We also want to acknowledge and understand that environmental and outdoor learning looks very different depending on your context and where you are. These can be in-school experiences, they can be out-of-school experiences, they can be happening in a variety of different settings, and this is going to look really different depending on where and how and who is collaborating to do it. And that is great. We want it to work and be flexible for the schools and districts who are implementing initiatives. We also wanted to make sure cultural relevance and competence was woven throughout the plan and was a key priority. We believe that all students benefit from culturally responsive learning experiences, and in order to have a commitment to quality, we need to ensure that we are prioritizing cultural relevance and competence. So there are 4 goals in the plan. Goal 1 is around strengthening that collaboration, bringing key stakeholders together. This is a lot of the implementation of the plan, and how do we really make this happen? What infrastructure do we need? So that's bringing people together, whether it's at conferences, meetings. How do we get the key stakeholders that we need together? We want to support schools and districts in developing their own environmental and outdoor learning plans. How do we utilize common measurements? How do we develop a strategy for funding? And how do we start bringing people together to really think about where the gaps are and how we create both formal and informal pathways to make sure that all students have access to these types of learning experiences? And that means bringing people together to think about what those pathways are. Goal 2 is all around professional development in environmental and outdoor learning. And that includes professional development for non-formal educators as well as formal educators, and both pre-service and in-service educators. So in order to accomplish this goal, we need to understand what's out there and what gaps are available. There are several key pieces that were highlighted through feedback and that were a priority. Those include interdisciplinary, place-based, and research-based instructional strategies, professional development around innovative technologies, professional development around best practices, and professional development around culturally relevant and responsive teaching practices. And another key priority that arose was ensuring professional development around leveraging place-based local knowledge, local practices, and Indigenous ways of knowing in a way that is respectful and responsible. Goal 3 is a big goal. It's improving statewide access to environmental experiences for all students. So we want to identify barriers and create opportunities to reduce those barriers, whether that's funding or busing or whatever that might be. We also want to increase awareness of the value of environmental and outdoor learning among families and caregivers. We also want to make sure that we are improving access to equitable and culturally relevant learning experiences. And finally, goal 4, which is brand new in this version of the plan, we want to create pathways to explore career opportunities both in the environmental field and understand how environmental literacy can inform a career in any field. That is going to entail identifying some of the barriers to pursuing environmental and natural resource careers and developing strategies to help support navigating those, identifying existing P20 pathways in Colorado's career and technical education plan and opportunities for collaboration, educating career influencers about how they can help youth navigate these pathways, increase awareness of career pathways, creating a work-based learning toolkit to support organizations in connecting with students in schools. And finally, one of my favorites, developing guidelines to support a local environmental literacy diploma endorsement. So implementing the plan, there's a lot of levels that implementation happens at. And there are some things that need to happen at the state level. There are some things that are going to need to happen at organizational level. And there are some things that individuals can do to move strategies in the plan forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the couple of strategies that we're working on as kind of first steps. And then I want to talk about some of the things that you might be able to do as soon as tomorrow. So as I mentioned, No Child Left Inside legislation was reintroduced in April of this year. That legislation would provide $3 million to states that have an environmental education plan for implementing that plan. $3 million isn't a huge pot of funding, but it's more than we have today and would help us move a huge step forward in really thinking about how to implement this. So we will be working with our national colleagues on advocating for this bill and sending out action alerts. Any opportunities you have to contact your senators and representatives and share how you are implementing the plan is always a great way to get their attention, let them know about the plan that exists. We have sent communications to all of the Colorado representatives and senators, but they love hearing from local folks. So watch for opportunities to support these efforts, and we'll definitely be communicating out with a whole network about how we can help support this moving forward. The second thing that we are doing is really thinking about doing a landscape analysis. You probably noticed several strategies in the plan related to identifying barriers, identifying gaps. And so we are going to launch a landscape analysis to gather some of that data and information that hopefully will help us develop recommendations and communicate with potential funding sources about how to bring more funding to help implement these strategies. We're going to do this in 2 phases. The first phase is going to really focus on non-formal environmental education partners and what programs and supports they can offer. And the second phase will focus on efforts happening in schools and on formal education. And we're doing it in that order for a couple of reasons. One, we want to collect the information on non-formal providers. So when we reach out to formal educators and are asking for information, we can provide you with some really great resources to connect into, and all the information that we have collected on the non-formal providers in your area. And then 2, we do want to give formal educators a little bit more time to get back into a quote unquote normal. That's not the right word, but after the pandemic, we know it's been a really rough 2 years, and we want to give a little bit more time as we're settling back into new education rhythms to really collect that data. Here's just an example of a piece of what that landscape analysis might look like. This is a tool that was developed by the Southeast Environmental Education Alliance. You can see this is a map of Kentucky. The orange dots are the non-formal environmental education providers, and then you can layer on different map layers to tell you about the students and schools in the area. So you can add in a layer to show where all the schools are in relation to the providers, so that you can get a sense of what providers are around you. You can also add in layers related to environmental factors, like you can see where power plants are located in relation to your students, what supermarket access looks like, what flood risk looks like, what air quality looks like, and any number of environmental factors. You can also layer in health indicators and factors, as well as socioeconomic factors. And we hope this will be a tool in both understanding the context around the students you work with, so that you can pick things to study that are really relevant to those learners and help identify phenomena that you can study. So let's switch gears into kind of the local level of implementation and what can you do. So in the plan, each strategy, the goal is listed, and then you'll see the more statewide strategies. And then there's a list of stakeholders and recommended actions that each different stakeholder might take. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it gives a few ideas that different stakeholders might think about in order to tap in. I'm really excited that we have, of course, teachers in the mix, but we also have students. What can students be doing and thinking about that contributes to plan goals? What can caregivers be thinking about that contributes to plan goals, as well as a number of other stakeholders? These are greatly abbreviated, but you can see just a couple of the examples of strategies that formal educators can take, whether that's incorporating field-based learning, participating in professional development, using the school grounds, implementing a green schools program, sharing career opportunities with students. There are many recommendations in the plan that formal educators can tap into and may already be doing. This is probably the easiest action you can take to celebrate the launch of the plan, and that is signing the Outside for 5 pledge. Outside for 5 is a national campaign that is going on right now, where we're asking educators across the country to commit to incorporating 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, or any meaningful amount of time, whatever works for you, in outdoor and environmental learning. It takes 2 minutes to sign the pledge. You'll get periodic updates and resources you might be able to use. And hopefully we can generate a great list of folks who are doing this work across the state. And our goal with this campaign is to attract some media attention, again, so we can highlight what's happening in states and how environmental and outdoor learning really is supportive of what students need, particularly for socio-emotional learning, and which is important right now. So that's easy. We invite you to do that right now. Another resource you can dig into tomorrow in the plan is Colorado's Environmental Literacy Learning Framework and the standards that are related to environmental and outdoor learning. Those have been curated by the content specialists at the Department of Education. And really, we went through the standards using this learning framework of what are the attitudes related to being an environmental steward? What are the skills related to being an environmental steward? And what is the knowledge, the environmental literacy knowledge that students might need? In the plan, one of the appendices goes through and lists all of the standards. You can see the framework, or the way it's laid out here. You can see the grade level on the left, the content area, the standard, the grade level expectations, some relevant questions and concepts that you can be tuning into, and then the standards code is there as well. The standards are listed for science, social studies, reading, writing, and communicating, health and PE. Yes, health and PE are the 5 that are included in the appendix. So you can check those out, dig in, see where you're already hitting, and opportunities to engage students in environmental and outdoor learning even more. The final resource I want to talk about in the plan that you can use again tomorrow is a template for creating your own plan for environmental and outdoor learning. And it takes you through 4 different steps, and you can create your own plan for environmental and outdoor learning at a number of different scales. You could do this for your classroom. What does this look like? You could do it as a team at a school. Maybe it's all the teachers in a particular grade want to think about how you're going to use environmental and outdoor learning. Maybe it's a school-wide plan. Maybe it's a district-wide plan. You can use the same 4 steps to move you through the process. I'll just summarize it here. There are more guiding questions in the template. But step 1 is developing an implementation team, thinking about who you would include, whether you are working at the classroom level or the district level. This work is easier when we bring in partners, and whether it's partners of the individuals who lead field trips you take, parents or caregivers who support your classroom, or whether it's the district level and bringing in facilities and maintenance and outdoor space folks in, as well as learning folks and folks who are more dedicated to content. Who would you include at the scale you're working at? Step 2 is really thinking about, what do you want to accomplish? The plan lays out a statewide vision, but your goal may be very specific in terms of what you really want to focus on at your school, in your classroom, in your district. So really thinking through some guiding questions about what you hope to be the result of this plan. Step 3 is a self-assessment and really thinking about what you're already doing. And my guess is most folks are already doing something. There are very few of us who are doing everything, but there are a lot of us who are doing something and have things to build on. So the self-assessment takes you through each of the 4 goals and gives you the opportunity to reflect on what's already happening and what might we want to build in, what more might we want to do here. It gives you an opportunity to open brainstorming. Step 4 is planning and then action. And so really thinking about after you've done that brainstorming and have this whole list of strategies, prioritizing those and thinking through which ones you really want to move forward, and then doing the action planning to think about the hows. Who's going to take the lead on that? What's the timeline for it? What are the steps we need to take? And so that is in an appendix in the plan. You can dig into it again as soon as tomorrow and get started thinking about what environmental and outdoor learning might look like in your school. The more we can share the stories of what's happening and see examples of these plans taking shape, the more we'll be able to scale, and folks will be able to share and copy and learn from what's happening in different places around the state. So that was what I wanted to share with you this evening. I invite you to download the plan. You can find it at www.caee.org. Check it out. Take a look at some of those recommended stakeholder actions. Think about who you might be able to share it with. We'd love for you to take 2 minutes to sign the Outside for 5 pledge. You can do that at www.outsidefor5.org. Sign the pledge and you'll get some resources. You'll be eligible for prizes. If you're interested in connecting with your regional leadership councils, please reach out to us and let us know so we can connect you with those folks and they can point you to resources in your area. And then finally, we would love to be a resource. So don't hesitate to reach out to CAE for what we might be able to help you with. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your interest in Colorado's environmental education plan. I look forward to talking with you more and working with you together to implement the plan. Have a great evening.